For the last year or so, I've been driving a 2007 Hyundai Elantra as my daily driver. It's been reliable, economical, and a great all-round car, but something has started to go wrong recently, and let's try and work out exactly what that is, and take a look at my cheap daily driver.
Unassuming, boring, reliable, and most importantly of all, cheap. I've owned this Elantra for just shy of a year and have driven it 9,000 kilometers. It's been a dependable car to get to work in, and I haven't been afraid to load up the boot with lots of building materials. I paid just 2,500 Australian dollars for it, finding it on Facebook Marketplace last year. It had an extensive service history, but was due for a few things, such as the upper radiator hose, spark plugs, ignition leads, oil and filter change, transmission service, and the replacement of the timing belt, water pump, and 2 drive belts. While we installed lots of those items ourselves, we did opt to get the timing belt and water pump installed at a shop. But it turns out that they didn't fully tighten the top 2 bolts that held the water pump on. But it also appeared as if the cabin filters had also never been changed, likely due to them being a real pain to remove. And since then, it's been a fault-free car for almost a year until now. Great for everyday driving, but recently it's struggled to start, taking many attempts to turn over. Let's take a closer look at that, shall we? And here is the engine, a 2-litre 4-cylinder G4G C6, and impressively it has no leaks whatsoever, even after 320,000 kilometers. And first up, let's change the front headlight bulb that's died. The filament probably failed when I went down a bumpy dirt road recently, and this car uses somewhat less common H7 globes, so I bought a spare for when the other one inevitably fails. It's also worth inspecting the new globe, as you never know if someone has happened to return a dead globe in the box that you just bought. A year ago, when we serviced the car for the first time, the air filter looked like new, but now's a good time to see just how it's looking after 9,000 more kilometers. It looks far dirtier than the new one I got really cheap, so I figured it was a good time to put the new one in. Cosmetically, this car is pretty good. The hubcaps are scratched up, but at least they can never fall off. The front bumper is also slightly misaligned, apparently from hitting a bird at highway speeds, which resulted in this bit of plastic also coming off. The car's computer gives no fault codes, which is not uncommon if you've got a failing crank angle sensor.
And today's video is brought to you thanks to EcoFlow,
who have a wide variety of quality portable power stations, but which one is right for you? So I'm going to compare 2 compelling offerings from EcoFlow, the smaller Delta 3 Plus against the larger Delta 2 Max. Weighing around 10 kilograms less with half the base capacity, the 1 kilowatt Delta 3 Plus is a great option for travel. This compact power station is easy to carry, but it doesn't skimp out on features. And just like the Delta 2 Max, it has dual solar inputs supporting solar charging at up to 1,000 watts. Using AC charging, both power stations can be charged up super quickly, from 0 to 100% in under an hour for the Delta 3 Plus, and the Delta 2 Max can charge even faster. The AC output of both power stations is also impressive. They both have 4 outlets, with the smaller Delta 3 Plus capable of 1,800 watts with a surge of up to 3,600 watts. And if you need even more AC power output, the Delta 2 Max can output 2,400 watts. Both of these power stations are super quiet, durable, and best of all, they're expandable, with the Delta 2 Max up to 6 kilowatt hours. One edge the Delta 3 Plus has over the Delta 2 Max is the faster under 10 millisecond switchover time, making it a great UPS for mission critical devices. Both power stations can also conveniently be controlled and operated via the EcoFlow app. They also have a great variety of high-speed USB outputs for smaller devices. And now's a great time to check out EcoFlow with up to 24% off during the Easter sale.
To find out more about EcoFlow's power stations and other things they have available, click the link in the description below.
I had the battery tested and it is indeed working properly. The negative terminal was slightly loose, so I was sure to tighten that up. And I called the dealer that had been servicing this, and it actually turns out that the fuel pump was replaced back in 2022 because of a recall. So definitely look into that if you own one of these cars, as you may be eligible for a free fuel pump installation. Clearly the car does eventually crank over, but it seems to be becoming more infrequent. On the occasion that it does turn over, it will get a spark. And all signs point to the problem being the crank angle sensor failing, which you can see just below that small hose. I figured I'd take a gamble and buy a new sensor, which was 70 Australian dollars from a local auto parts store. There is a little bit of wire that has to be dislodged to remove the plug. It's a little bit tricky to see, it's on the left side. My father said that a lot of Hyundais would come in exhibiting similar no-start problems, and that doing this repair often got the cars running again. With the 10mm bolt removed, the old sensor could be wiggled out of the hole. It looks as if this could very well be the original crank angle sensor. At the very least, it is a genuine one. I was sure to wipe off the surface before putting the new one in. A little bit of grease is a good thing to apply to the gasket on the sensor. Here we've finally got it sitting correctly in the hole, with the connector back on and the bolt tightened. The airbox can now go back on, and with my fingers crossed, does it now start correctly? Well, it seems to. With the car now seemingly free of any issues, it was time for its oil change, and I'm very curious to see just how the oil looks since it was almost a year ago we put it in, and I'll release the filler cap to help it all drain out. To give me better access, I also removed this little guard held on by 3 bolts, and with a 17mm spanner I loosened off the sump plug, being sure that the metal washer came off with the plug, and after several minutes the oil had mostly drained out. I love that the filter is super easy to get access to, although you definitely want to raise the car like we did with some ramps, and after letting some of the oil drain out, I finally removed the filter, being sure to clean the mating surface of any debris. And you should also grease the rubber seal before seating the new filter. You could use some of your new oil to achieve the same result. I then threaded it on, doing it up as tight as I could by hand. Here's the oil that had done 9,000 kilometers. The old filter now looks like a nice creme brulee, and into the engine goes some full synthetic nylon oil that I got on special. I collected about 3.7 litres of it in the oil pan, so I'll put slightly less than that back in, and we can measure exactly how much oil has gone in once we're back on flat ground. And after wiping off the dipstick, it turns out that it was sitting right on the full marker, so no need to add any more oil. Moving on to the windscreen wipers, that desperately needed replacing. For some reason, one of the wipers had a different assembly that I struggled to remove. My father resorted to some karate moves to get the wiper arm off. The other blade was far easier to remove, thankfully, and as luck would have it, the mount that came clipped onto the new blades was the correct one, and I got these at cost price for only $6 Australian each. After completing work on the car, I thought it was a good time to fill in the service book and check out some of the other stuff in here. Wow, it even comes with a DVD. Yes, this is an 18-year-old car. Originally costing $20,894, the original owner was born in 1922, which is pretty insane. The car has no rust since it's been in Adelaide its whole life and is mechanically sound thanks to a lot of servicing over the years. Now let's take a closer look at the DVD, which I bet has never been played before. Oh, and look, you get some rather large stickers. But what exactly is on this DVD that's apparently for home use only? I think it's fitting that we try it out using a laptop also from 2007. Oh, but I think there is a disc already jammed in the slot. Not to worry, I came prepared.
Thank you for buying a new Hyundai. To ensure you get the most out of your Hyundai, we'd like to show you around a Hyundai Expert Service Centre. If you're here at the dealership, please help yourself to a tea or coffee, or maybe a cool drink.
Oh, look at that little Hyundai Excel nugget in the back there.
Talking about the latest equipment, let's talk to our Hyundai technician, Nathan. Hi Nathan, playing computer games again?
Wow, way to call me out for playing way too many computer games. Apart from this 10.5-minute video clip, there is nothing else on the DVD, no menus either. Back to my Elantra. The headlights are very fogged over, and my father let me use some of this stuff he bought. First, you've got to make sure that the headlight is free of dirt and debris, but also make sure that the surface is dry. Then you've got to wipe the abrasive paste on using the provided pad. You should also mark around the headlights with tape to avoid damaging your paint. But I also forgot to buy masking tape, so oh well. After 2 applications of the paste, I wiped off the surface with a clean cloth. Now here comes the fun part, the sealing spray. Masking around the edge of the headlight would have made it far easier to not get this spray on the surrounding paint. The fogging over plastic lens is due to prolonged UV exposure, and this generally isn't a permanent fix. After a year or so, the headlights will probably look just as foggy once again. Short of replacing the headlight lenses entirely, this can be a fairly cost-effective way to make them look good, at least for a while. Knowing the paint code, I was also able to get a can of spray paint made up. This will hide some of the bigger scrapes on the bodywork, and once it dries, it should look a bit closer to the surrounding paint. Well, at least I hope so. For an 18-year-old car, it doesn't have many scratches at all though, just the usual ones you'd commonly see on the bumpers, doors and wheel arches.
So, with the old crankshaft position sensor replaced, it started perfectly every time, for 1 week. Then the problem came back. So we thought since we were still not getting any codes being tripped, we would change the camshaft position sensor, which can also cause problems like this to arise.
This is located just behind the engine, close to the timing belt cover. The raised plastic edge surrounding the 10mm bolt means a socket was definitely required to get this part out, and once I lined up the 10mm socket, I was able to loosen off the bolt. Then the old camshaft position sensor could be wiggled out of its little hole, with the rubber seal thankfully still in place. This is likely the original part, which has definitely seen a lot of use, and with the new part lubricated, it was ready to go back into the engine. It was a little bit hard to line up though, and not being able to see where the bolt hole was as it was facing the other way was a bit of a challenge. And I am glad this is a relatively easy thing to access though. Will it start without any trouble? Well, it sure will. I think after all this car has been through, it deserves a good wash. These days, this is my preferred way to clean my car, mainly due to the convenience. Plus, I find using the pressure sprayer quite a lot of fun. It's super satisfying. And now we get to see just how good the paint on this car can look. And I do like to go to the car wash late at night since there's barely ever anyone around. Oh yeah, nice and shiny once again.
It once again started perfectly every single time for 1 week. Exactly 1 week. So when I went to leave Saturday morning for work, the problem happened again.
I've heard it's somewhat common for these aftermarket sensors to prematurely fail, but due to the age of the car, I don't even know if you can get genuine ones anymore. Once again, the air intake comes off for easier access to the sensor. I would also suggest moving the upper radiator hose as well. Now that we've got enough access to reach the connector, which I still find quite fiddly to get hold of, getting the socket on without dropping it is very challenging, especially since I was back to using my own cheap little eBay toolset. Thankfully, I didn't drop the bolt or sensor during the extraction. And after wiping off the engine oil, there aren't any obvious signs of failure. Either way, to rule out it being a problem, I got another cheap crank angle sensor. With it lubricated, let's put it in and hope for the best. I'd strongly suggest doing this in the daytime, which might make it easier to see what you're doing honestly. And with a tiny degree of motion, I was able to begin tightening the bolt. I really do need to invest in a good socket set. Previously, I'd just been borrowing my father's tools. And as it starts to rain, I got the car back together. With my fingers crossed, let's try to start the engine. First try. No luck. Second try. It started normally. Once it's running, it never seems to have any problems. It's just sometimes it doesn't start.
But you know what was really funny? I thought I would just try running the car without the camshaft position sensor plugged in at all. And you know what? It started normally, like it would before. It would start most of the time fine, and then occasionally it wouldn't crank over.
It's almost as if the car isn't actually using any information from that sensor. The next 2 attempts started fine, but then it didn't crank over once again. So I thought it was time to try resetting the ECU, since it's likely the computer found the original camshaft position sensor to be faulty, and solely relied on the crank sensor perhaps. When disconnecting your car's battery, always remove the negative terminal first, and be super careful not to touch both terminals with your hands at the same time. The results might be shocking. With the battery disconnected, I figured it couldn't hurt to clean the terminals off. This battery has had its cells tested and it was fine. It also holds a good voltage. To reset your car's ECU, have the battery disconnected for at least 15 minutes. I left mine unplugged for several hours since I forgot about it. Now to start the car up once again.
So with the ECU reset, I did the relearn procedure, which basically involves idling the car for several minutes, then driving it at normal speeds, at highway speeds, in reverse, or going through all the gears. Ran great. Problem solved. So it was either a combination of one of the 2 sensors being faulty or failing, and the computer learning to not trust the data from those sensors.
Now, I think my car deserves a bit of cleaning inside as well. I moved the other cars out so I would have enough room to set up lights to film this. The SX model is the bare bones base model, which means it does lack some features. But honestly, the only one I wish this car had was cruise control. In fact, there are no buttons on the steering wheel at all. Since this is my daily driver, I have installed a cheap dash camera. And for added security, we've put in a jumbo-sized plushie. And since no humans use the back seats, I've stashed a lot of spares in the footwells. A jumper battery, spare clothes, shoes, and fluids are great to have just in case of an emergency. Our dog Minnie also loves the back seat. She gets so excited when we go for car rides. But that does mean that there is quite a lot of dog hair that has gotten onto the rear seats. The stains were already on there when I purchased the car last year though. I'll start by giving the carpets and seats a solid vacuuming. followed by some very satisfying foaming interior cleaning spray, and after a few minutes you're supposed to scrub the fabrics with a clean cloth. And once again I went through with my vacuum. It's very dusty where we live, so it's not too surprising that most of the surfaces are dirty. I chose to use some Armor All interior cleaner, which should help protect the trim from sun damage. And if you've got tinted windows, never use glass cleaner, at least on the inside of your car. My windows are not tinted, but I would like to get them done in the future. Apparently this car was often parked undercover in a garage, which explains why the interior is pretty good. And I must say, car AC controls really peaked here, didn't they? They're just so easy to use, even without looking at them. Sadly, adding cruise control would require more than just simply replacing the steering wheel, so I'm just not going to bother. And something else that I'm not going to bother with is replacing my floor mats. These are actually the ones that came out of the Toyota Echo I made a video on a few years ago. My opinion is they're going to get dirty anyway, so who really cares what they look like? This is just my daily driver, and all these sort of small aesthetics don't really matter to me. And after 18 years and 320,000 kilometers, the seats are honestly in pretty good condition. Sure, it's a very basic car, but the styling is still modern enough not to feel too dated. The simple CD player and easy to use AC controls are all someone like me needs in a daily driver. And if you do have to have passengers in the back, the seats are pretty comfortable. There is also no shortage of small storage areas. I use this one to hold my UHF radio. And here's one for holding a hat of all things. And after a year and about 9,000 kilometers, I thought I would also check the condition of the new timing belt. As expected, it still looks good. As it very much should do. Now that it's running fine once again, what is it like to drive? Whether you're on bitumen or gravel, it's very smooth thanks to the independent front and rear suspension. It doesn't lack power either. The 2-litre inline-4 engine outputs up to 105 kilowatts. Yes, it is a cheap little economy car that's almost 20 years old, but it still looks very respectable, and in my opinion, better than the 2011 through 2015 model Elantras. It's inconspicuous, unassuming, and I don't think anyone's going to bother trying to steal it. When you've got a reliable, cheap-to-run car, you just stick with it, especially in today's economy. I do love this car, and I'm glad we've fixed the starting issues, and with any luck, the car will reach 400,000 kilometers. I'll continue to keep servicing it regularly and drive it until the wheels fall off of it.
Thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the video. Thanks to EcoFlow for sponsoring this video and to the channel members that contribute to help make this a little more financially viable to do videos, especially ones like this. I'll see you in the next one.